I'm really excited about this next conversation and the person who we're going to be inviting back here to lead this next conversation so that we as a community can strengthen ourselves and each other and everybody who we're supporting. Folks, I want to welcome back a man who doesn't need a whole lot of introduction. Well, his face and name is all over the building. He's a man who's kind enough to open up his stage for this very important summit today. Please welcome Dr. Phil McGraw.
Well, me again. Is everybody learning something today? Getting some good information? Yeah. I've been watching it all, and I thought that was really interesting. Are you guys hot? These buildings are very old, and so if you want to like cool them off, you have to start a week in advance. And then if you want to warm them up, you have to start like 2 weeks in advance. So we're 10 days into warming it up, but we'll try to warm it. Should we warm it up a little, Bones? Because you're wearing a coat. But well, this building's been here since like the 20s. In fact, I'm standing right now in the middle of the yellow brick road from The Wizard of Oz. This is right where the yellow brick road came. And they did the Godfather, a lot of the Godfather office scenes and stuff from here. I mean, all kinds of history here. Now they got me. Okay, let's get started. Please welcome Senior Vice President of Human Resources at Verizon Wireless, Alan Gardner. Also joining us is co-founder of A Call to Men, the next generation of manhood, Ted Bunch. Here we go, here we go.
How are you?
Ted, welcome, welcome.
Thank you.
All right, why don't we all have a seat? Now, whoops, I don't usually have that there, so I'm not knocking stuff over. Now, Alan, you've been at Verizon for over 25 years now.
That's correct.
And we want you to tell us about Verizon's relationship with A Call to Men.
Okay. You know, as we've talked about today, we, for over 20 years, have supported a number of domestic violence prevention organizations. Many of those individuals are here in the audience. You know, Verizon has had a commitment to using its technology and its resources to help social issues. So the relationship with A Call to Men was just a natural extension of what we had been doing in the domestic violence community. And one of the things that interested us so much, I mean, there was discussion this morning about having men involved in the conversation. And so we were really impressed with what they were doing to advance that conversation. So we have, you know, as a starting point, we have had a relationship with their A Call to Coaches event, where they bring coaches and mentors for young men in to talk with them about how to have healthy relationships and what healthy masculinity is about. We have executives that participate in some of those events, you know, during the day, in addition to providing funding. And then, you know, we also have individuals that will help try to bring individuals to those events.
Yeah. Ted, it's got to have meant a lot to have Verizon get involved. We've been working with them just on this event, and they are amazingly buttoned up, focused, and passionate. And there aren't a lot of companies who focus on this issue. I mean, these aren't things you talk about in polite society, right?
That's right.
Why is it important for corporations to take this on and support organizations working to prevent domestic violence in all ways, particularly the way you guys are doing it?
Well, the Verizon Foundation, the Verizon Wireless, Verizon as a whole has been a tremendous support to our organization over at least 6 or 7 years now. And it's really important because it doesn't only show the corporate leadership, right? Because they're really pioneers and visionaries around this space, around ending violence against women and making our world a better place. So they're visionaries around that, pioneers around that, but also understand the importance of prevention, because oftentimes we have to go in and intervene where we have shelters and men being arrested and held accountable, and they understand the vision of going upstream, to prevent it from happening in the first place. So we've been very fortunate to have Verizon's support, and it also allows us to kind of gives us more credibility when we go to other corporations as well, because Verizon is someone who's so reputable.
Yeah, and since I'm kind of know the lady that's in charge of this here, Robin, from our standpoint, I kind of got to pick what part of this I was involved in, and the call to men, a call to men was where I wanted to be involved, because I know that the anonymous poem is true. Children do learn what they live. And the most powerful role model in any child's life is the same-sex parent. I mean, that son looks up to that father models what that son does. And then we have so many surrogate fathers in terms of coaches and mentors and teachers. And what is the takeaway here? When you say a call to men, what is the call? What do men need to do a better job of in today's society?
Thank you. Well, our mission at A Call to Men is that we work to create a world where all men and boys are loving and respectful, and all women and girls are valued and safe. So when we talk about prevention, we talk about ending violence against women, we have to really understand that while the overwhelming majority of violence against women is men's violence, that's a fact. The overwhelming majority of men are not violent, but we are silent about the violence that other men perpetrate, and that's as much of the problem as the violence is itself.
I know we've talked about the Ray Rice situation and what happened on the videotape, and I know when Robin and I first watched that tape, we watched it together, and she had such a profound observation of what happened after that occurred with the security guards and the people around. Robin, talk about that. What was it that you saw that jumped out of that tape? Because I think this is what Ted's talking about.
Yes, the first thing I noticed was bystander responsibility, that there were so many men standing around just watching her, just looking at her and not moving to help her. They were actually, seemed like having a casual conversation with Ray, not even moving to help her. Just all gathering. More men would approach and still not move to help her.
And who finally did?
And finally, a woman came through that group of men and went directly to her, leaned down, and helped her up and took her away from that situation.
Yeah, so come on.
This is the core of the issue, because it's really about the socialization of men and how we pass that socialization down to our boys. So if we're anywhere in Main Street, USA, and I go to a man, when I see him hit his wife or his girlfriend, I say, hey, knock it off, stop it. He's going to say to me, mind your business. He's counting on me to be silent. So our socialization has taught all men, not just those men who caught for being abusive, because this is a famous man who happened to get caught for doing something, where domestic violence happens every 12 seconds in our country, every 90 seconds sexual assault. So we've all been socialized, all of us, all men have in our country, to see women on some levels having less value than men, seeing women on some level as being the property of men, and seeing women on some level as being objects for men. So that collective socialization, it's not about those individual men need to be held accountable, but it's the collective of men. So it's about us raising our voice and raising our boys in a different way, where we're teaching them to value girls and women and to value themselves. And once we promote and increase a loving and healthy and respectful manhood, we'll also decrease and prevent domestic violence, sexual assault, bullying, and homophobia.
And, you know, I can tell you in the era I grew up, I never had a conversation with a man in my life, not my father, not a coach, not a teacher, ever said a word to me about where the boundaries were in a relationship with a girl when I started dating. And that's why, to me, Verizon is about connecting people. I mean, for you guys to be involved in this and get this message out, this makes people think. I can't imagine what would have happened if my generation had heard this conversation. But nobody talked about that. Right. But you guys are getting that message out.
Absolutely. you know, we have what's called our credo, and there's a phrase in our credo that says we run to a crisis and not away from it. Yeah. And so I think, you know, so one of the things that, this is such an important issue. We've been involved for so long. I was telling someone now it's probably kind of the worst of times and the best of times for this particular issue, because as you pointed out, it provides an opportunity for a platform to be able to talk about this particular issue and to continue to raise the awareness of this issue. That's why I'm so glad that the organization has kind of upped the ante a little bit and committed an additional $23 million at this particular point in time over the next couple of years to address that.
By the way, that's not up in the ante a little bit. That's we upped the ante a little bit with $23 million. That's a game changer, man. That is a game changer. And you know, it's all about you know, we use these words that so much that they lose their meaning. But we talk about education, you know, like teaching young men what's right and what's not. But think about it. It really is an educational thing. If you don't tell them what's okay and what's not, if you don't tell them where the boundaries are, if you don't teach them alternatives, I've learned from a psychological standpoint, people turn to violence when they run out of socially acceptable ways to express themselves. They do. I saw this play out one time. I went to Texas Tech for a while in Lubbock, and we were in a bar outside of Lubbock, which is dry, and I had a friend there with about a 400 IQ, and, you know, he's a little guy, and this big cowboy with a head like a buffalo walked up to me. I mean, this guy had a huge head and a hat on. He just walked up and said, "What's your problem?" And my buddy said, "Well, what do you mean by problem? Let's discuss what," and I'm behind him going, "No, you don't, no, this guy doesn't have as many words as you do. You don't want to do this." And he just kept debating him until he got knocked out. And I saw right there, people, when they run out of options, then they do stupid things. And we need to get to these young men before they're ever in a relationship that is emotionally charged and teach them, here are the boundaries, here's how to use your words, here's what you have to look at in terms of respecting other human beings and especially women, and these are the things you absolutely don't do under any circumstance ever. And to do that, it's got to become part of the curriculum in the schools. It's got to be funded. The teachers have to be trained. We have to do things because you can't do it all with a call to men. We've got to get your protocols into the hands of other people.
Yeah, I'd like to add to that if I could. So we also have to start changing our language, right? So we have to start changing our language, even around domestic violence and sexual assault, to make it a language that focuses on the perpetration, men being the perpetrators, right? So that the language needs to stop. Needs to change and bring men into it. But also our language, even in our homes, because in order for us to have that emotional and social learning that you're talking about for our boys to, by the time they date, actually be able to have words, and when they grow older for conflict resolution, then we have to start allowing them to talk about their feelings and not shutting their feelings down when they're 4 years old, telling them not to cry when they're sad or hurt or disappointed or painful, because then all that we do is the only emotion that boys and men, where it's safe for us to express, is what? It's anger. So we wind up seeing anger everywhere, so we don't have any other language except to express through anger. So it's really about that socialization of men and boys, and part of that socialization is always around devaluing women and girls, because who cries? Girls and women cry. So you don't want to be like a girl. That football coach, a good guy, well-meaning man, Dr. Phil, who's teaching his son how to throw a football, says you have to throw harder than that, son, because you throw like a girl. And girls throw just fine. Moni Davis proved that to us this summer, didn't she? So, but all of these messages, the takeaway for these boys is that, well, then I have to be tough. I can't show fear. I have to, I can't cry. I can't do any of these things that ultimately, later on in life, men live about 6 years less than women because they're dying from all these stress-related illnesses, Dr. Phil.
Yeah. I had a coach tell me one time, he said, big boys don't cry, but men do. And I never forgot that. and it was after we had gotten beat terribly in a game. He could tell I needed to cry. We was playing for University of Tulsa. We got beat 100-6. Not a good day.
No. You know, with Verizon's support of our coaching events, because you mentioned the coach who impacted your life, because this is so important, because coaches have such an impact on our boys. When we talk to youth, who impacts them, they don't necessarily remember their teachers so much, but they remember their coaches. And back to your point also around teaching our boys, you know, I talk a lot to high schools and colleges. I was just at the University of Miami the other night, and one of the things that we don't teach boundaries to our boys, and so boys think that no means try harder or no means get her drunk. We don't have these boundaries that we need for our healthy boys, in order to have healthy boys.
Well, in addition to all the work we've done on the Dr. Phil Show on this issue, I am a father who has raised 2 sons. And so I want to talk about what is the role for men in this conversation. How should, for everybody that's home watching, everybody that's going to watch this once it's posted, even if they don't see it streamed today, how do the dads get involved? How do the big brothers, the coaches, how do they start this conversation, and what's the takeaway?
Well, at A Call to Men, our work is really around believing that the conversation is about inviting men to the conversation, right? Not indicting men. So we invite men, not indict men about manhood and where we are currently. And basically that violence can be changed, it's a learned behavior and can be unlearned. So our conversations with men is really around seeing this as a men's issue, that the overwhelming majority of violence is men's violence, that we need to stop being silent about it, and we need to really take more responsibility, because it's not just about me being a good guy doing the right thing, right? I have my daughter went away to school, and her last year of college, she was in Charlottesville, she wanted to live off campus. So we went and looked at apartments. I'm in New York, Dr. Phil. We went to look at apartments, and we decided on apartments. She was going to live with 2 other seniors at UVA, girls, women. And so when we went to look at the apartment, she said, when we agreed upon it, she said, "Dad, when you move my things down, will you please bring me a pair of your old shoes or boots?" Well, why would she want a pair of my old shoes or boots? To put outside the door so she'd have some sort of a presence of a man there. Now, she's never been sexually assaulted, thank God, always been safe. But she's not with me anymore, Dr. Phil, right? So now she's here, and these men in Virginia, I have to hope are going to be good men. So she has this, she knew intuitively, what we know statistically, that women will experience, 1 out of 3 women will experience either sexual assault or domestic violence by the hands of a man in her lifetime. So wouldn't it be great for those in your listening audience and here today, when that girl in your life is 5 years old, when she goes to college, we don't have to put anything outside of her door anymore. And that's the message to men is, envision the world you want for your daughters. How would men and boys act and behave in that world?
Yeah. And you know, to Robin's point earlier, I think it is so important that we understand as men that the women in this world, we have the same responsibility whether we know them or whether we don't. If you're in a parking lot, if you're in a restaurant, if you're somewhere and you see a woman being victimized, you have to intervene. You have to, and I'm not saying put yourself in a dangerous situation, but when you call attention to it, it tends to stop. Right. You call the police, you call the authorities. Mm-hmm. I'm not asking people to be vigilantes, but I'm asking them to be bell ringers. If something's happening, raise the awareness, yell, stop, what are you doing? Draw attention, because those guys at that point will snap out of that and take a step back, and then you can intervene. We've got to be responsible for all the women in our lives, not just the ones that we maybe know. It doesn't matter. If somebody's hurting one of you and one of us 3 are standing there, we have a responsibility to do something about it. You know, we just have a couple of quick minutes here. Any comments or questions from the audience about anything we're saying or anything that you might want to add to it? Yeah, stand up. We'll bring you a microphone right away. Bones is coming right to you. Say who you are and your organization, if you will, please.
Staples Kids for Kids program.
Right.
So my first comment is an enormous thank you to Verizon for being a corporate ambassador You're setting quite an example for the rest of us. It also struck me that wouldn't it be interesting to have this same conversation with other corporate heads, oftentimes men, where this message is being delivered to them so that maybe HR policies can change, where we can provide services to families where there's abuse. And we can change a cognitive dissonance, if you would, around the fear of wrapping one's brand identity around such a tremendously sensitive topic.
All right. Stand up. Bones, right there.
Has been working in domestic violence, and particularly with men who have battered women. And so my question to you is, how do we make sure that we are getting services out there for men who need help? Because all around the conversation around what happened with Ray Rice, we talked a lot about victim safety, but how do we get more word out there that there are programs who can help men who want to stop violence in their lives?
Ted, you want to take that?
I would love to. Thank you for the question. Well, you know, I think that first of all, men know how to be respectful and non-abusive. They do it with their boss, they do it with their coach, they do it wherever there's a consequence if they don't do it. So the violence is selective and exclusive. I think the messaging, and men can change, I'm counting on that. I think the messaging that we need to do is really around messaging to men around what this behavior is. This is no longer acceptable behavior. Right? And if we look at violence against women as the manifestation of sexism, that's right, I said the S word, right? If we look at that as a manifestation of sexism, well, let's look at another ism. What with racism, if there was someone who was doing this racist act, what program would we put them in to make them stop it? We would say, stop it, that's not acceptable, knock it off. And this is the message we need to give to men also. It is a learned behavior it's something they learn as they grow up. Right? But so is racism. So again, it's I really would challenge us to say, yes, we need programs to do the good work they do, but we need messaging from our culture that says this is no longer acceptable, because that's not what men are getting right now, from my perspective.
You bet. All right, well, they're going to give us the hook here based on time, so we're going to have to keep our feet moving. I want to thank Alan Gardner, Senior Vice President of Human Resources, Verizon Wireless, and Ted Bunch, co-founder of Call to Men, for joining us on this important day. Thank you so much.